it takes 5 years to become the kind of person to land a job in 5 days. So even before I started landing a job in 7 days, right? I was the kind of person, I read books every day. During my free time, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at night, I would watch courses on Udemy. I would take notes. I would be really proactive in learning new skills so that I was always up to date in my skill set. And that was something that was really attractive to employers. And I also worked on my soft skills as well.
Hello and welcome. I'm David Hatch, and in today's episode of the Leading with Integrity podcast, we have another special gift under the leadership tree. Have you ever pondered how things like the Great Resignation, quiet quitting, bare minimum Monday are reshaping the landscape of employment and leadership? Or how to improve your career prospects, build more job-specific skills as well as some of the softer skills like leadership, and then leverage all of these things into a focused, successful job hunt? Now, some of those trends and issues that I mentioned just now have obviously had an impact on the way the world of work works and on the frequency at which many people, especially in the tech industries, are having to change job or move on. Joining us today is Margarita Yang, an extraordinary guest who wears many hats from author to financial advisor and business owner. And Annie's here to share her invaluable insights on this subject. Annie's book, The 5-Day Job Search, and her financial advice YouTube channel have inspired many, 1 million plus and counting. And today she's going to be unwrapping some of that wisdom for you listeners and for me as well, if I'm honest. So we'll be talking about the broader changes impacting the nature of work and employment, exploring the power of personal branding in your career journey, and extracting the key leadership lessons from Annie's experiences with leaders in the workplace over the years of her career. All of it is relevant to leadership in any industry, not just technology, and I hope you all find it useful.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Annie, thank you for joining me today. Didn't quite realise how early you were getting up to do this. It's 6 a.m. for you, so apologies for that with the time difference, but it's great to see you and have you on the show today.
David, thank you for having me on your show. I'm so excited today to talk about some secrets from the 5-Day Job Search, this new book that I just launched, and share it with your audience on leading with integrity.
Best place to start then, I think, is give you some time to introduce yourself, tell the listeners a bit about your background, what you do, why you do it, and what gets you out of bed in the morning, especially at 6 a.m.
Thanks for the early morning. Early morning bird catches the worm.
Right.
Yeah, so basically, I'm someone who didn't go straight to college after high school. I worked a whole string of minimum wage jobs, and eventually I did go to college. I got a degree in communications. But then after that, because I got married to a husband who did his master's degree in the middle of nowhere, I moved to the middle of nowhere, Texas, where after college, I worked another whole string of minimum wage jobs. I worked part-time jobs all at once, 5 of them. And one of them being Domino's Pizza. And then we moved again for his PhD program. And we were moving to Boston. I figure, okay, I didn't have job opportunities where I was. Maybe this is my time to make my mark. I'm really ambitious. Maybe I can get an accounting job here, even though I don't have an accounting degree, because I'm really good with my household money management. I would say I'm the CFO of our household. I do all of the budgeting and stuff like that. So I figure, okay, I'm good at this. I don't have a degree, but let's see if I can give this a shot. So I started applying to 50 accounting jobs a day. And then by the end of the week, I got an accounting job. And that job didn't work out because the manager and we didn't really get along. But so 2 months later, I started another job search. Just started applying with the resume I already had uploaded to Indeed because of that prior job search on a Tuesday morning on my way to work, started applying to jobs with a one-click button. And then by the end of the day, I already had a request for an interview when I checked my phone. And then that job search only took 6 days. It was another accounting job. I really love that company and things were great, but I wanted to buy a house. We were saving for a house. And when I did a calculation, I realized, while I'll have enough saved for the down payment, I'm not going to meet the debt to income requirements. So I need to up my income by at least $25,000. Seeing how my coworker never got even a $1 an hour raise, where he's asking basically for a $2,000 a year raise. They never gave it to him. I said, okay, I don't think they'll give that to me. So I started applying for jobs again. But this time I said, I don't need to be all gung-ho about it. I can take my time until somebody gives me the salary that I need because I want to buy a house. So again, 1 year into this job, I started applying. I started applying on a Monday night, applied to 50 jobs a day. Next morning, already got an email requesting for an interview. And then I went into that interview on Thursday. And on Friday, I got the job offer. So then in this time, I got a new record. It went from 7 days to 6 days to 5 days. I got a 5-day job offer, which I took because this guy gave me the $35,000 increase that I was looking for as well, with no accounting degree. So this is basically a short intro to who I am and what I do. I teach people how to have the same results that I've had.
Always a bad sign for a job, isn't it, when you're applying for new ones on your way to work? Yeah, so that's quite an interesting. And the period over that time that was happening, was that in recent years, or are we looking a bit further back? Is it where does it fall in terms of COVID as well? Out of curiosity.
So that first job search was in 2018, and then 2 months later again, 2018. And then that third job search was in 2019 in November. So You would say it was I would say that was during the Wuhan outbreak in China when people were freaking out in China, but it wasn't a global thing. And then I haven't had a job search since. But what's happened since is I've really developed my personal brand online. So I'm a YouTuber with 1 million views. I started posting a lot of articles online as well. And I also have expanded my network on LinkedIn too, ever since that third job search. So I've been getting pitched for job offers. Even this year, I was offered a part-time CFO position from a client that I turned down. You know, I get pitched for job offers. Even last week, I was pitched a job offer, which I had to tell the guy, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to turn this down as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's especially interesting then, the timing of it, because I think there's been a lot of noise, hasn't there, in recent years about how the labour market is changing and how particularly the newer generations are not staying in jobs as long as they used to, certainly, which seems to be borne out by your experiences, but also they're looking for different things in their jobs. And I think a lot of the commentary is tied that to the Great Resignation and to COVID itself and that whole dynamic. But it sounds like, for you at least, it was predating all of those things.
Yeah. I stayed all during the COVID thing. I'm still working the same job that I had before COVID. Yeah. When a lot of people have switched jobs, either because they were laid off or fired during COVID. So they were forced to switch jobs. I think a lot of that is from this kind of thing. But another thing is, I think because there was so much government stimulus money being pumped into the economy, it's like this whole boom. There's so much money to go around that employers have to spend. And especially in the tech sector, we saw they did a lot of hiring, even though they didn't need to. It was I think I read in an article, they literally hired just so that their competition can't swoop up the talent. A lot of them did do that kind of hiring, and we're seeing a lot of those talent being let go at the moment because there's not as much money to go around. Not
very nice dynamic, that, is it? But yeah, something to be learned, no doubt. With the direct experience you've had of some of that job market then, can you tell us a bit more about the 5-day job search and how, I mean, you've given us the dates, I guess. What are some of the steps that you take to help you land those 3 jobs?
So some of the steps is, it's actually a very misnomer title. I get the comment a lot that it's misleading because if you open up the introduction, even on the first page of the intro, I talk about how it takes 5 years to become the kind of person to land a job in 5 days. So even before I started landing a job in 7 days, right? I was the kind of person, I read books every day. During my free time, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at night, I would watch courses on Udemy. I would take notes. I would be really proactive in learning new skills so that I was always up to date in my skill set. And that was something that was really attractive to employers. And I also worked on my soft skills as well. Public speaking, vocal articulation. Something I started doing after I started making more money was I started working on my appearance as well, because I heard someone say, before you open your mouth to speak and before people judge your personality and your character, they're going to take a look at you. So I realized, you also have to make a lasting first impression with your physical appearance as well. So I started working on my sense of style and fashion, my hair, my makeup, all of that. And so therefore, all of this stuff has just snowballed to become the 5-day job search, and now to become landing a job offer without even having to apply for anything. So a lot of this book is basically step by step, all the skills you need to learn along the way to become this kind of person. So it goes beyond just crafting your resume to be super attractive. It goes beyond just making your LinkedIn look nice and doing well in your interviews. It's more about developing yourself as the kind of person that's worth it, that everyone wants to hire.
There's a parallel there, I think, in what you're saying. So the 5 years leading up to the 5 days, between something you hear quite a lot in the freelancer world around justifying your rates. And there's that old kind of cliche or truism, I don't know which it is really, maybe both, about, the client who's questioning how much they're paying you and say, why am I paying you this much for, let's say, the 5 days work in this case? It's only going to take you 5 days. Why do I have to pay so much? And the answer, of course, is you're not paying for the 5 days. You're paying for the 5 years or 5 decades before that of learning the expertise and becoming able to do it in 5 days. And it seems very similar to me.
Yes, I have to add on to that. It's like they come to me, right, to solve a problem. You're not paying me for my time. You're paying me for the ability to solve your problem. Now, you can go to a whole bunch of people who can charge a lot less, whether as a freelancer or an employee. You can pay them a lot less. But in the end, you're going to spend 2 years, 5 years, and discover, they can't solve my problem. Because you know what? Chances are, especially if it's a really complicated problem, it's the kind of problem that requires a whole bunch of skill sets and someone who's able to see that bigger picture and put all those skill sets together to solve your problem. The problem is these days, our kind of economy industry has encouraged specialization. So people think, the more I specialize, the more money I'll make. We have proactively encouraged this in many fields. And that is true. You can make a lot of money as an employee doing that kind of strategy. But in business, you make a lot more money, I believe, being able to do multiple things, doing them well and combining it all together. That's why we see Steve Jobs. He's combined technology and design. He's someone who has managed to combine both. And it's something that's highly valued.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, definitely. And I think the other aspect, when we're looking at it from an employing perspective rather than freelancing, yes, you could go out and get 10 people and pay them minimum wage to do the same thing. But ultimately, there's a motivation and leadership question there as well. If you're going out and expecting people to work ridiculous hours for minimum pay, then they're not going to be as motivated. They're not going to value you that much as an employer. They're certainly not going to really trust your leadership if that's the almost predatory way that you're choosing to employ. And I think there's a lot to be said for that outside of the leadership dynamic itself, but paying people what they're worth in a lot of ways is the first step towards making them feel valued and building that culture of good leadership and teamwork and all these other things that really just end up in what is a successful company, isn't it?
Really? Yeah. I think the first step is definitely paying people what they're worth, but also respecting their boundaries as well. Because I came across this, she's a now really big YouTuber. I don't remember her name, but she was saying that she worked in this big law firm, right? And she had always wanted to be a lawyer and become a partner later on. Like she was striving for those promotions, and she was making over $230,000 a year. But she never had work-life balance. Like her employer never respected her personal life boundaries. Basically all time was their time. And she had never asked for a day off, never took a day off. And this one moment, I think a few years into that job, her grandfather or uncle was like in the hospital, in the emergency room, and he was definitely going to pass away. Like that was the judgment that they made. And so she asked for off, just 5 days. All she wanted was 5 days of no work. And they said, yeah, sure, we can give that to you. So she took off, to go fly out and visit her relatives. And throughout the time when she was in the hospital visiting her relative, they were calling her, hey, when are you going to do this? Hey, we need you to do this. Hey, don't you remember we have this deadline? We need you to do this. Why? And they specifically said this to her. Why do you think we pay you so much money? Why do you think you're paid this much money? Because we own your time. You have to do this for us. Like they genuinely said that to her. So it's not like they implied this kind of attitude. It was more like, we own your time. This is why we pay you this much. And I thought, wow, that's really disgusting. Thank goodness she's a smart woman, and she managed to use her social media following to create a side business of her own, which she eventually took full time and quit that law job. But many people are not able to do that. But this kind of mentality that just because we pay you what you're worth and we pay you a lot of money, we also get to disrespect your work-life balance. Yeah. I mean, you have to have both.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, you do. I think it's interesting though. I think one of the biggest takeaways from that story for me is the fact that they obviously believed her work was worth that much money. And so by treating her that way, they've lost access to that work because she's taken it elsewhere. So at best, it was a short-sighted leadership strategy. Let's call it management, because I don't think it was leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a very stark example where they've just explicitly said it. In most places, it's a bit more implied, isn't it? But
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But I've also found, because I tend to be like really hardworking at every job, regardless of what they pay me, I will always give in my best and go beyond what's been asked of me. And a lot of times, employers see that and they're like, okay, let's just tack on more work onto her. They're like, okay, well, we know we can rely on her and she's going to do it well, and someone else isn't going to do it as well as her. So we're just going to pile it onto her instead of like giving it to her coworker who can do a little slower and not as well. Instead of like evenly dividing the work up so that everyone gets a fair amount, they kind of like just pile it onto me, which is the reason why in the last 4 years, I have stayed at the same job despite all the, great resignation that you're talking about. It's because my boss respects these boundaries, right? I came in working 40 hours a week, but I started looking for things to automate away. And as I've automated, I cut it down to 35 a week. Instead of working 9 to 5, within a year, I asked, can I work 9 to 4? Right. And he said, sure, you can go home 1 hour early. I mean, so long as you keep your work done, you meet all the deadlines, I'm okay with that. And then eventually leaving at 4, but then I have found myself 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock with nothing to do. I'm like looking for things to do. There's nothing to do. So I started like watching training videos of the software that we were using. It's called Appfolio. It's a property management software specific for this industry. And so I started watching every single video that they had in their help guide and reading every article, going on every live webinar and taking notes to find out more about how we can better use the software. And I presented with him with the ideas that I've learned in that year. And I said, hey, if we take this, and this, we can automate a lot of this away and save time. Would you be open to that? He said, yeah, I'd be open to that. So eventually, slowly with all the improvements that I've implemented, I was able to cut down to 20 hours a week. And now I'm at 10 to 15. And all for the same salary as well. He never cut my salary in that time. But I also never asked for a raise. I simply said, let me keep cutting down the hours and just keep paying me the same. I'd be happy with that. The only thing I ask you is don't ask me to work more. Like whatever you hired me for is what you hired me for. If you're going to tack on more duties or pass on to me responsibilities that my coworker couldn't do, right? I'm going to have to ask for a pay increase as well, because I honestly don't think that would be fair. So in all these years, he's respected that, and he's never piled on more work simply because I've shortened my workday.
Yeah, I mentioned it being a short-term view just now, but I think that's it, isn't it? It's if you're taking the long-term view, then first of all, the happier your people are, the more productive they're going to be. But also, I think it's about how you view that kind of relationship in terms of what you're getting in return for the money. I think the old-fashioned way of looking at it is it's money for time, but that doesn't really work, as we've just seen in these stories you've just told us. But I think what it should be is money for output. So if I'm hitting the target, if I'm meeting the KPI, if I'm doing all of the things that need to be done, it shouldn't matter to the management, to the leadership, whether that takes you 2 hours or 12 hours, as long as it's done. Now, occasionally there will be deadlines and so on, of course. But I think in a general sense, it's about what the employer is paying for and how they view that relationship, and then how they're valuing their time, how they're valuing your time. And I think the other thing is, particularly in your story, and it's one I've heard so many times now. It's
really,
I've been there myself, like the whole thing of, I've done a really good job, I've got it finished quickly. So the response by my boss is, great, well, you've got a load of free time, here's some more work.
Oh.
And so what happens is you're being punished for being good at your job.
Yeah. Well, this is why I'm so loyal to my current employer, because he respects that. He's like a rare diamond, I would say, who actually sees that value and is like, okay, you have free time, go ahead and take it. So long as the job's done, I'm happy. Otherwise, he knows I'm going to walk. He knows I will walk.
Well, this is it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think he's clearly a more switched on manager. And I think being able to take that longer term view and understand that everyone has lives outside of work. It's not a be all and end all. That's not the primary thing in people's lives most of the time. And being sensitive to that as a manager, as a leader, being open to the fact that you sometimes need to support your people instead of them doing what you want all the time, and all of these things, which he sounds like he's ticking all the boxes. So pleased to hear that.
Well, he has room for improvement, of course.
Oh, well, everyone does, though. There's no such thing as perfection, is there?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, the similarity of experiences in so many people in so many workforces around the world.
I think it's hard not to fall into that trap, though, where someone does their job so well, you just want to give them everything. Like, oh my gosh, if you can solve this, can you solve this as well and do this? And then the work just piles on. It's hard. It's very easy, I think, to fall into this slippery slope, especially if you don't know how long a task takes. Like, I have an employee for my accounting firm that I've developed on the side, right? Initially, I tracked her hours and I wanted to know how long a certain task took, but I'll admit it's really difficult to know how long certain things take, especially if it's a brand new project with brand new tasks that I have no experience with. And especially if she has a learning curve. So let's say I'm asking her to design a website, right? Well, that's kind of vague. How many pages on the site? What do you want on each page, right? Do you have all the graphics ready? Do you have the copywriting ready? It's quite a big project that needs to be divided up into very small chunks. So eating an elephant one small bite at a time, right? And I don't know how long it takes to design a website as a newbie and as someone who's experienced. So I gave her this project and she was spending hours upon hours and hours. And, finally she came back to me after a month and she said, you're going to have to pay me for more hours because I can't get this job done. And then I was like, I wish you had this conversation with me on week 1 because I have no idea how long it takes. I want to be reasonable, right? I don't want to overload her, but it's also the fact that we work remotely. I don't see her working and I don't want to feel like I want to track her and see everything on her screen as well. So I just want to trust her. So it's really fine line to balance. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And there is a certain added set of challenges when you're working remotely like that, isn't there? But I think for me, I think what's always worked well is what you said. It's have the conversation early and make sure the expectations are understood by both sides. If you like, I don't want to call them sides because it's not really a confrontation, is it?
Mm-hmm.
If you've done it the right way, at least.
Right.
It's a difficult one. And I think, so thinking back to if there were multiple employees and one of them has found a better way of doing something, and rather than punishing them by giving them more work, if I were that manager, the first thing I would do is ask them how they've reduced the time and ask them to teach everyone else to do that. And then you look at rewarding that behavior as well if you can. So yeah, depending on where you sit in the organization, there's a conversation to be had about, can we incentivize this somehow? Can we offer a bonus structure based on innovation or, time to output, something like that? And again, there are risks in doing that as well, because you can start to get people gaming the system when it's linked to their rewards and all of this. But I think if you manage it well and you have that conversation so everyone knows who's doing what, everyone's on the same page, everyone has the same expectations of what's going to be produced and when and all of that, I think there is a path through it that doesn't involve creating disgruntled employees that leave and badmouth your business to everyone in the industry.
Right. It is, though, what you're saying, it is a little difficult more for creative work, like designing, because that's not something you can really measure. A great design can be a flash of inspiration you took when you were in the shower away from work, or you can sit at your desk for an hour trying to brainstorm so many ideas and none of them might work out, So for task oriented things, I think it would work, but for something more creative, it's rather difficult to shorten that,
Yeah, agreed. And measuring the output as well, I guess it's tied to, has it met the brief? But again, even that can be quite subjective. And I guess it depends on the purpose it's for as well. So if it's a website, you could maybe link it to number of visits or number of clicks or, I don't know, conversions, something like that. If it was an advert, maybe a bit of design work for that. Maybe it's link it to number of sales resulting. I don't know, but it is a difficult one. I agree. I don't know the answer.
That makes sense, though. That's given me some ideas. Thank you.
Oh, okay, cool. Glad I could help, I think. You mentioned your YouTube channel earlier as well, over 1 million views, which is impressive. I'm definitely not jealous about that, honest. So what led you to starting that up, particularly on a subject like financial advice as well? That must be almost a saturated market, I would have thought.
Yeah, it still is. And I think I had always wanted to start a YouTube channel since I was 20. So from 20 years old up till 24, 25 years old, I always wanted to do YouTube, but I never had the courage because I would tell myself, I'm not pretty enough for the camera, or like, I don't have a personality for the camera, little things like that. Or like, I don't have the right lighting kit to get started. I had all sorts of reasons to not get started. But one day I saw my husband watching a finance video about this. She was like this beauty YouTuber making a video complaining about her $100,000 in student loan debt and how it was so impossible for her to pay off, and how she wanted to spend the next year documenting her trying to pay it off and trying to find out the right financial advice. And then in this video, she said, and someone told me that I should go consolidate my student loans and this is going to help me pay it off faster. And I was like, no, that's not going to work. And then she's like, so I went to this financial advisor and he told me to consolidate my student loans. So I guess that's the right thing to do. And I was so angry because that is just because you consolidate a loan doesn't make it, faster to pay off. It is more about you managing your money and saving your money, living below your means, and then paying off your debt as fast as possible, regardless of whether you consolidate or not. Consolidate would help you maybe lower your interest rate, but in the end, you still need to pay your loan back, So I was watching her, and then I watched her later videos as she was documenting, and she even shared this Excel sheet of how much money she was making and what she was spending her money on. She was making, get this, she was making between 10 to 12 grand a month as a YouTuber. Yeah, I swear. Wow. She was making over $100,000 a year while complaining about owing $100,000 in student loan debt. And not only that, she shared her expenses. She was literally spending $1,000 a month on airfare and around $900 a month on clothing and makeup and hair. And I get that she's a beauty YouTuber, but like if she just cut it back a little bit, she can easily pay off her student loans, I think, in 1 to 2 years. Like it's very much doable. And I felt like she was doing people just total like injustice here, like disservice with what she was saying. And people were listening to her. Like they valued what she had to say simply because she was an influencer. And I was reading the comments and they were like, oh, you're so hot. You're so pretty, man. Like, oh, I love that. Like, not only are you hot and you're pretty, like you're giving this financial advice. And I was angry. I was beyond angry that people were following her just because she was pretty. And I thought, people need real advice that works. Doesn't matter if someone's pretty or not, and I'm going to make those videos. So that's honestly what got me started. Yeah.
Well, fair enough. I think my conclusion there is I'm in the wrong career. That does seem a bit, I don't know if hypocritical is the right word, is it? But certainly tone deaf, like, because there's probably people watching that who are in serious financial difficulty and taking that advice.
Yeah.
When really, she wasn't, was she? If you're making that kind of money.
No, she wasn't. And she was spending it on travel, clothes, and makeup. That's why she didn't have money. That's why she lived paycheck to paycheck. She literally spent it all on like disposable expenses, like things that you like don't even need at all. And then what made me even more angry was like I started watching more YouTube videos. So the thing is like I got good at money from reading books and from reading blog articles. Like that was what was popular before YouTube was like something popular for finance, right? So that's how I got into learning money management. So I was not into watching finance videos. And so finally, after that one, I started watching more of them. And I was watching like some of them like cater to women and a lot of these like how to stop being broke, how to stop living paycheck to paycheck, how to save your money. And they were saying things like, well, stop drinking coffee at Starbucks, or like stop buying flowers to decorate your home, quit buying scented candles. And I wanted to scream because here I've been working minimum wage jobs my whole life. I literally just stopped working at Domino's Pizza and got my first accounting job. That was on the cusp, like at that transition when I was watching these. And they're telling me not to buy scented candles. Girl, I've never bought a scented candle in my life. I've never bought flowers in my entire life either. Never bought a coffee at Starbucks. Your advice is definitely like catered for middle class people who just can't stop charging their credit card, right? But it's not going to help people like me who are earning minimum wage, already have a tight budget, and don't want to use credit cards at all, and is like looking for every way to save every single penny. It didn't help people like me who are looking to cut back on necessities. Like I had no trouble with like not spending money on things that we didn't need. What I really wanted to do was cut our necessities down to like the bare bones. That's what I needed help with. And they weren't speaking to that.
It's easy to be cynical, isn't it? And a lot of these YouTubers, you think that they probably don't actually know anything about what they're saying. They've just realised people are interested in this. They'll click on that, or that it's something people will pay for because they need help with that problem. And I do feel like there is a certain thing, isn't there? The whole marketing gurus, and you've got to have the problem, you've got to solve the problem that people are willing to pay you for. And yeah, fine, but also it needs to be a meaningful problem. And you need to know something about it as well. Like, don't just
a lot of these people, they're shills. I'll be very honest.
Yeah, this is it.
One of the I forgot his name. I also shouldn't say his name. That wouldn't be good. He would come after me, right?
It's fine.
He has over 100,000 subscribers now, but when he came to me, he had only 5,000. My channel had blown up at the time. He came to me, he had only 5,000. We got on a call and he said, hey, I like the fact that you made a video on how to save money on minimum wage. And then he asked me to collaborate. I watched his videos. I was like, I don't think we have the same financial philosophy. I'm not interested, because the philosophy matters as well. I don't want to just collaborate with another finance YouTuber unless we want to promote similar philosophies toward money. And so he told me on the call, oh, I got a degree in accounting. But then after college, I got an accounting job for 2 months. I realized I hated accounting. So I never worked in accounting after that. And then he bought like some ATMs and stuff and started putting them around town and was making money off of the ATMs. But he made all the videos that he made from there on after, right? He said, hey guys, my name is so-and-so and I'm an accountant. I'm an accountant and I want to give you guys some financial advice. This is how you can save money on minimum wage. Keep this in mind, he also never earned minimum wage because right after college, where do you get the money to start your ATM business and stuff like that? He never worked minimum wage in his life, but he saw that I had made a video on how to save money on minimum wage and that title was doing well. So he made a video on how to save money on minimum wage, copying a lot of the advice that I gave in my video, but just in his own style, but he basically took all the things that I talked about in my video and said that with his own style. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that two things there. One is that YouTube's full of whatever it may try to do. There's full of all these copyright issues, isn't it? I shouldn't say too much because they might remove the video if we do. The second thing I think, which is really important, is being led by your values. And I think you talked about it in terms of financial philosophies. I think it's the same thing. It's about not just, and this is something that small business owners and freelancers will identify with hugely, is not just going where the money is because it's easy and you need the money, because of course we always do in those particular professions, shall we say, but following actually what your values are, what your purpose is, what you're there to do, and not compromising those just because you need to pay the bill that month, which is a lovely sentiment, not always practical, of course.
It will work though. I've been that kind of person. I don't compromise for money. I've experienced what it's like to earn money and have it go against my personal values. It's like a cognitive dissonance, and you feel the need to justify what you're doing simply because you need to pay the bills. And I didn't like that feeling. And I decided, you know what, even if I have to work at Starbucks, I'd rather do that rather than compromise on my values. So to date, I don't take a sponsorship. Honestly, I think I have 85 videos up. I've only taken one sponsorship, and that company went under. And then there was one company that they didn't offer me a sponsorship. I just liked their product so much. I asked for an affiliate link, honestly. But it's because I don't want to compromise on my values at all for the sake of money, ever. And I think it's something that's doable if you live within your means. Like if you are able to look at your income, budget, and save money, you won't have to stoop to that.
Indeed, but more importantly, you'll be able to sleep at night.
Yeah, I think that's important as well.
Yeah, well, I think, if you don't sleep well, you're not going to achieve any of the other things anyway, are you, most of the time? So interesting. So we've mentioned the Great Resignation already. There's also quiet quitting. There's Bare Minimum Monday as well as a new one I'm hearing at the moment, or it's new to me at least.
That's new to me as well. I've never heard of that one yet.
Yeah, I don't know why Monday. I mean, and how it's different to quiet quitting. Anyway, I'll have to look it up afterwards. I'm sure there's loads of other buzzwords around this whole thing as well, and they keep hitting the headlines, and you keep seeing the back and forth between kind of employee groups and leaders there, and then big business leaders and railing against it all. Do you think all of these things are the sign of a wider change in the nature of employment in the labour market, or do you think it's more of a temporary reaction to difficult economic times or COVID or whichever?
I genuinely don't think it's either. I don't think there is a black and white dichotomy. I think there's a third answer. My personal opinion is the media is just trying to get your eyeballs. All these social media influencers want your eyeballs. Mainstream media wants your eyeballs. They're always trying to look for this new hot trend to talk about. They don't want to talk about the same thing. It gets outdated. It gets boring. They want something fresh. I mean, I feel like this is just the same thing with a different face on it. Like we were saying, 10 years ago, millennials, so entitled, so spoiled, lazy, wants to do the bare minimum, but gets paid well kind of thing. But just now we've got Great Resignation, right? And all this now bare minimum Mondays. It's just a different way of saying the same thing. I honestly think that's what it is. Because now I'm trying to promote this book, I'm trying to get media attention, right? I'm doing everything it takes to market and sell this book. So I'm learning about PR and press releases, right? I'm learning about how to do that. And I'm also on the subscription list for Help a Reporter Out. So I'm reading about like these articles that these journalists want to write. And it's like they already had an agenda. They're just like looking for people to contribute their stories to it, right? They're not like saying, okay, let me look for a story that exists. No, I already have this headline that I want to write an article about. So can I find people to contribute this story to, right? As well as like the press releases, like how do you get a journalist's attention? You need something that's really like attention grabbing, clickbaity, something more sensational. Otherwise, it's like bland and boring, and it just gets lost in a whole sea of other people's press releases. So it is how it is today. We want to grab people's attention. It is the advertisements that make money. And so if we can grab your attention, we can get more advertisements, better paying ads as well. So I think that's what it is. But I don't see any change at all, really. I mean, people who have always wanted to put in the bare minimum will always be that way. People who always want to get ahead will always be that way as well. There's no trend. That's my personal philosophy on this. Reading how it is and trying to interact with PR right now. That's what I've discovered.
Okay. Not the answer I was expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're at risk of getting me on a rant now about the media and the way it reports things and this whole balanced journalism thing in inverted commas. And I think there is a certain cynicism around it, isn't there? And you're possibly right in this context as well, because there is I think there's a quite unpleasant undercurrent to all of these stories in the way that they're written about this subject and how it's kind of all employees are lazy. They just want to work from home and working from home isn't really working. And if I was to go really down the kind of conspiracy theory rabbit hole, then you start thinking about who's paying for these stories, don't you?
And they're trying to get people back in the office.
Exactly.
Because the commercial real estate's sitting empty.
There we go. Yes. And then when you get national leaders as well, who have friends who own all those buildings saying the same thing in the press too. It's it's quite interesting.
Well, they've got a financial stake in it, you know?
Yeah. So it's easy to be a pessimist. It's easy to be cynical about all of that sort of thing. But I think at a company level, an individual organization, a small business, I think the vast majority of leaders actually, they recognize, or they're starting to recognize, that it's all noise. And what really matters is the people, because they're the ones who are going to deliver the results that they want for their business. And so if those people aren't willing to work for your organization because you take that point of view, you've got to change your point of view, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. I personally think like whatever they say in the news is always noise. They just want to get your attention. Maybe there is a trend, but honestly, how does that affect you? If you run a business, if you're a leader or you're a manager, if you do the right things, if you're reasonable, right? If you're the kind of person that's rational and you listen to your employees and, it's a relationship. If you're able to build that, if you listen to them, to what they want, and you try to give them what they want, but also have expectations in return, right? If you have a vision, if you have values for your organization that people can line up with, if you have something that they can reach for and get excited about, what does it matter what the news says? You have a great organization. You have something that could be top of the top that everyone wants to work for. You can attract the top talent for all you care, right? The way Steve Jobs attracted people to his organization that were like really passionate about what they were doing, it wasn't for the pay. He paid well, but I mean, you can pay anyone well. That doesn't mean they're going to put in their best work. They're not going to be necessarily excited for what they're doing. So what he said is when he hired someone and he interviewed them, what he was looking for wasn't their answer. He was looking for a spark go up in their eye. Like the moment like they have this certain spark, he knows they're going to do well here because they're going to be really passionate about the things that he wants to do for the company, right? So, you could listen to the media all you want and then go into like this whole downward spiral, like, this is what all employees are like, and then have this kind of expectation, and then they will prove you right because that's what you believe. Or you could be more proactive in learning how to become a better leader that everybody wants to work for.
Yes, absolutely. I, of course, believe that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here right now. So couldn't agree more. And it's a nice segue into the next series of questions, which we're going to talk about leadership more specifically. From your career so far, all the organisations you've worked for, what's the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned?
Biggest one that I've learned is you can't change people. Yeah. Because I'm the kind of person, like, I love personal development. If somebody gives me feedback, I will genuinely consider it. I won't take it as a personal attack. I'd be like, maybe this person has some merit in what they say. Maybe I do need some improvement in this area. Like, what can I do about it, right? If there is something I can do about it, can I take a course? Can I read a book on this? Maybe I can and close this thing, or make it so that it is not as effective negatively, right? And so because that's my own personal life philosophy for myself, I always assume like other people want to do the same. So when other people come to me with a problem, I want to give advice. And then when they don't follow my advice, I get upset. I get really, really upset, and I take it personally. Like, did they not think my advice was good? Why are they not listening to my advice? If they just listen to my advice and they follow it, they won't have this problem. Their problem will be solved. I swear to it, because I have had this exact problem. I have solved this problem, so I know the solution. And I've come to learn, I kind of just have to let people suffer their own consequences of their problems, right? Even though I know their advice, I can offer them the advice. They don't follow the advice. I have to watch them fail. Like my friend, back in May, she got fired from her accounting position. And she came to me crying. I said, "You're really good at what you do. You were fired because you didn't notify management that you moved from New York to Florida." So she basically violated some sort of company policy that they had in place. It wasn't because she was bad at her job, right? I said, you can easily land a new job. And because you want to grow this photography business that you have on the side, you can also just get a part-time job and grow that on the side. So long as your bills are paid, then you don't become desperate. But 3 months later, she still hasn't followed my advice. She's been living off her savings, and her savings are dwindling. And she came to me, she was crying. She's like, "I'm going to be homeless. I won't pay the bills. Oh, I'm freaking out, blah, blah, blah. What am I going to do? I don't have any family here. I just moved to Florida." And I said, "You should have followed my advice 3 months ago, right?" But then she attacked me back. She said, "You're not supportive. You hate me. You're a friend. You don't care about me. I thought you would be a lot more emotionally supportive about my problem." And then I said, "No, I genuinely care about you. I want to watch you succeed." But she didn't follow my advice. So finally, she did get a job. She followed the advice in my book, The 5-Day Job Search. She got a 10-day job search. She got like multiple job offers in only 10 days, right? And then afterwards, she was telling me, "Wow, I feel great. I never knew how important money was." and she when she was in a better mood, she came to me and she was like, "Do we have a problem? Like, why are you upset, Annie?" And then I was like, I kind of just have to let you suffer the consequences of your own decisions, right? You are your own adult. You're responsible for yourself. So I can give you the best advice I can, but if you choose not to follow it, I kind of have to just watch you struggle. And I have to be okay with that. I think that's the hardest lesson to learn as a leader. This is a personal experience that I've shared, but this I think applies in business as well. Like, knowing people cannot change. You cannot make other people's decisions for them. You can guide them, you can influence them, but in the end, that decision is up to them. So like, you can try to persuade an employee not to leave. Your best worker, persuade them not to leave. You can put together the best package, right? But in the end, that decision lies with them. If they need to leave, they will, right? You cannot change other people. And you just have to accept that.
Yes, I do tend to agree with you. I think for me, where that is most relevant is in the letting people make mistakes, which is one of the things most managers struggle with. And I think there's that temptation, isn't there, because you may very well, as the manager, know how to do the job better, or at least in this particular example might. So the temptation is, oh, you're going to make a mistake. Just move out of the way. I'll do it for you. There you go. See, it's done. Great. Everyone's happy. Except no, they're not, because you've trodden all over their toes. You've basically told them you don't trust them to do their job. And you've also stopped them from realizing a learning opportunity by making the mistake. I think that's very, very much what you're talking about. As for when people have decided to leave, this might be a controversial statement, but I've always been very much, once they've reached that point of decided they're going to leave the company, I would never try to persuade them otherwise. For two reasons. One is it's really difficult, and they will have reasons why they've decided to leave. And I don't think it's productive for either person, and certainly not for that relationship, to try and change their mind. Because if you succeed, give it another 6 months and they'll be just as unhappy again, if not worse.
Yeah.
But the second one is, if it's already reached that point, you as the leader have failed to do your job properly anyway. You know, that it shouldn't have got to that point. You should have realized the problems way before they got to the seriousness of them handing their notice in.
Yeah, but some people leave for reasons beyond your control. Like you can do your absolute best. You can put in your absolute best to make sure people stay long term. Like I want people to stay 10 years, 20 years, you know? And that is my goal. Everyone who comes into my door, I tell them that. So if you have a problem, please bring it up with me right away, because if I want loyalty from you, you'll have loyalty from me, right? And I have led with this kind of philosophy, but the thing is, some people have personal life problems that have nothing to do with me. Like the one who just left back in June from my company, right? She left because her husband said he didn't want her to work. That had nothing to do with me. She loved to work, but she married into a Muslim family, and in their personal values, they don't believe women should be working. Women should be at home taking care of the house. And so she literally, when she was leaving, she was crying. Annie, I don't want to leave. I'm sorry. You know, like, so there was nothing I could have done, you know? So sometimes life pulls people apart in different ways, I would say. We just have to think that as well.
No, you're right. I think that's kind of the third one, slash the part of the reason for the first one, which is don't try and persuade them to stay. Because I think, as you say, either it's too late, as I said, or it's not for a work-related reason. And a lot of the time, that's none of your business anyway. So you probably shouldn't be kind of probing that properly.
Well, she came to me with that problem.
No, of course. No, I wasn't suggesting that she had. But yeah, it is an interesting one. I think that, again, speaks to the whole thing we were talking about right at the beginning around respecting people's whole lives and understanding that not everything they choose or decide to do at work is related to work or driven by work. It's because of what's going on in the other more important parts of their life, let's face it.
Yeah, that's right.
What do you think new leaders should focus on the most to ensure that they really do make a good transition from being that individual contributor to an effective leader and manager?
I think what they can do is they can think about, like, look back and reflect, right? Journal about this. What did they like about other leaders and managers that they've worked with? And what did they not, right? Like, put those in two different columns, try to emulate the ones that you liked, and then work on the ones that you didn't like. Like, for example, some of the things that I didn't like was, like, I had a manager that, like, didn't tell me he didn't like certain things. For example, that's the reason why at that one job, I only stayed for 2 months, because we had this clash. He was telling me things like, Annie, I don't like it when you print in color. Like, but he told me after I printed out the sheet of paper in color. Or like he told me, like, after the fact that I don't want you to print on a brand new sheet of paper if it's not something important that needs to be delivered out to a client. If it's not something important, then use an already used piece of paper, just print on the back of it. But he told me that after I had already printed on a brand new piece of paper, right? So, I mean, that's on him. He didn't have a training manual that I could have read. I mean, if this is something he wants from all employees, especially he's been in business, like, what, 20, 30 years? I mean, you would have think that there's a whole system set in place. He has certain expectations. Maybe this stuff can be written down so that people who are new can read it in the training manual, right? So I didn't like that experience. I'll be very honest because of what I went through. But, what I did was in my transition, I looked back and I said, I didn't like that, but I can solve that. I can make sure that people working under me will never have to go through that because I will have a training manual. Everyone can read what my expectations are before they start the job, and if there's something that wasn't written in there, and a new situation came up that wasn't already written down, I will make sure to update the training manual so that everyone after that will also know, So I think it's important for a leader to reflect back on their own prior work experiences, what went well, what didn't, and work based on that to begin with. I think that would be the best thing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other core of that is communication, which for me is, I don't know if it's the first, best and last aspect of good leadership, but it's certainly in the top 5 is one of the most important things of effective leadership is communicating well. And a big aspect of that is the situation you've described there is making sure everyone's on the same page. And we talked about managing expectations earlier. It's that, isn't it? Here's what I expect as the leader, as the manager. What do you expect from me? Make it a conversation, not a diktat or an instruction or a directive from on high or stone tablet on the mountain and so on.
Yeah.
Definitely an important aspect of leadership, 100%. We probably know who the worst manager you've ever worked for was. Who's been the best leader that you've ever worked for or with?
I'd have to just say it's my current boss because he's really been understanding of everything. I mean, I had to sit down with him for lunch back in August when my books just launched. And I told him, I'm going to be getting on 500 podcasts. I have a greater calling than working here. And, I feel like not for myself, but I have to get the book, the 5-Day Job Search out, marketed and promoted because we're going to have even more massive layoffs to come. We're going to have more bank runs as we've seen. And I think a lot of people are financially struggling and my book will help them. So I have this greater calling and I feel like I must answer it. So that means I need to open that door. And I asked him to be understanding, flexible and lenient. And he has, he understands I'm getting on 2 to 4 podcast interviews a day. And he hasn't complained one bit. And he said, if you need, I can even hire a part-time worker and to help pick up any slack. if it's like too much work for you, I'd be open to doing that as well. And to make sure that there is a smooth transition when you're ready to go. So I have to say, that's really mature of him to be. I don't think many managers would react that way. Many managers would be like, what? You're trying to leave? Now I have to start making sure you're not in the loop of company stuff, right? Or cutting access to company secrets and things like that. A lot of them would react in this way because they're scared someone's going to leave and take everything with them. But he's been a lot more, I guess, understanding emotionally. Yeah. So I have to say he's the best one so far.
There you go, listeners. Great leaders do exist in real workplaces.
Yeah.
In case there was any doubt, because sometimes there is. It is good to hear, though, and I think he's really showing that he's taking that long-term view and understanding that in the short term as well, there's not really much to be gained by saying no or making it more difficult for you to do that, especially if he's happy with the work that you do and he's happy with your results and he feels that he's able to pay you a fair wage to do it as well. I think there's a lot of upside to being understanding and way too much downside to not, I think.
I also think it's partially because honestly, if he weren't my boss, we'd be friends. I've tried my best not to cross into that friend's barrier, but I have expressed to him in the past because a lot of the things we have the same mindset, same philosophies, a lot of things in business we can agree on. So I feel like after I do transition out, I've expressed to him, I would like to be friends. I would like to stay in touch. not simply because I want someone in my network, because like I genuinely want to be friends with him. And I said, and later on, maybe a year or two from now, I want to start a business with you. I would like to be a business partner with you, not your employee, but an equal, right? I have expressed that to him and he's open to that. So I think there's that as well. It's not just like, okay, well, after you leave, goodbye, you know?
Yeah, but I guess part of that is what I'm saying, isn't it? Is the long-term view, is recognizing there's more to be gained, professionally and personally, potentially by being that more understanding and more people-focused and more empathetic, all these great words that we love to throw out, but this is it in practice.
Yeah, that's right.
Great story. Thank you. Let's talk about time travel. Everyone loves talking about time travel, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you could go back in time, how far back would you go and what advice would you give your younger self?
If I could go back in time, I think I would go back to 18. Because I was in that time of my life, I didn't go straight to college. I watched all of my friends go off to Ivy Leagues or other really prestigious universities. And I felt like I was left behind. I had this like fear of missing out. If I had to go back, I wouldn't do anything different. That was the path for me. I was not supposed to go straight to college, right? Because I needed to figure out myself first and not take on student loan debt to go with it. So my advice would just be like, everything's going to be fine, Annie. Quit freaking out. Because I'm always like so paranoid and worried for my future and wondering what is my future going to be like, yada, yada. And I step into that fear. I wish I wasn't so fearful. I wished I could just say, you're doing great. You're doing everything you should be doing. You're learning, you're reading books, you're improving yourself. You're not staying at home playing video games and watching YouTube videos and being like a deadbeat that keeps living with mom and dad and expecting them to pay for everything. No, you're going to work, even though it's a minimum wage job, but you're working, you're making your own money. You're saving that money as well. And you're learning, you're willing to improve. So keep it up. And 10 years from now, your life will be drastically different if you just keep up this trajectory.
I think that's something most people would identify with, isn't it? That feeling of fear, especially around that age when you're finishing school, you either are or aren't going to college and universities and these things. And there's such a lot of changes happening at a lot of pace.
It's a huge transition.
Yeah.
Huge transition. And you don't, like, people are always like, growing up, you're always told, oh, the real world is different. The real world is different. You know, adult life is not like this. Adult life has a lot more responsibilities. And they make it sound like it's so scary, you know, to learn how to cook or do laundry or take out the trash. Like I genuinely like feel like it was such a scary thing to hear growing up. Like, wow, this stuff must be so difficult. But no, I mean, it's the stuff that can be learned, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, I guess it's quite an uncertain time though, isn't it, in terms of the future and what to expect. And yeah, you're right. I think a lot of it is because it's built up in our minds. So I think, yeah, it's a very valuable advice that you would give yourself. I mean, who wouldn't want to go back and give their 18-year-old self that piece of advice? I certainly would. Yeah.
Leadership Heroes.
Awesome. Well, time's been flying, so we must have been having fun. One question left. My favourite question. Everyone gets this question. Looking forward to hearing your answer as well. It's called Leadership Heroes. The question is, if you had to pick one person, and they could be anyone you like, alive or dead, past or present, real or fictional, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
This person isn't famous. His name is Bob Bowes. He's actually in the UK. I think he's in London. But when I met him, he was living in New York City. He was the president of the Bay Ridge Toastmasters Club for me to learn public speaking. And I worked under him for like 2 years in that club. He helped me develop my public speaking skills when I definitely thought I didn't have any talent at all, but he was so encouraging. He kept saying, no, Annie, like this is when I was 20. So it's right around that time when I wasn't so sure of myself. What does it mean to be an adult? You know? So he was kind of like more like a father figure, like always pushing me to be better. I wish I could work with him in other things, right? Because I only got to see him once a week for an hour. So while I was like the vice president of the club, that doesn't necessarily mean I worked really hands-on with this guy. He was definitely someone that other people had called a leader. And I have to agree, because he loves personal development and he loves developing people as well because of the way he developed me, right? Personally. If I could, I would love to work with him. The problem is he's retired. So I'll never get to experience that. And he's also in the UK now. So I haven't seen him ever since.
Selfish of him, isn't it, really? Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing. That's a good story, good example. Not much else I can say about your choice there, but it is always really, I guess I prefer hearing ones where people have actually met their heroes there, because it's always a little bit more interesting and a little bit more personal. Yeah.
That's the thing. I had a little taste of what he was like. Versus I can't just say, oh, I wish I worked under Martin Luther King, or I wish I worked under Obama. I don't know who these people are, aside from what you hear in the books or in the media. And who they are in real life could be something totally different. But I had a taste of what it was like to work with Bobbos, even if it was just for an hour a week. Right? Yeah. And I would have liked the full meal, Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And actually quite telling the impact he's been able to have on you in such a short period of interaction as well. So I think that speaks volumes too.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I think we're out of time. Last thing I'll say is if any of the listeners have enjoyed our conversation, I'm sure they all have. But if they would like to learn more about you and what you do and get a hold of the 5-day job search, would you like to point them towards a website where they could do so?
Absolutely, David. They can go on AnnieYangFinancial.com. And also, I have a special offer for the listeners. For a limited time only, they can get a 10% off discount on a signed paperback copy of the 5-day job search. So all they need to do is add the book to the shopping cart on AnnieYangFinancial.com and use the coupon code LEADING, LEADING. The listeners can also follow me on YouTube. That's mainly where I am on social media. They can search Annie Margarita Yang and I should show up. And I also just made a TikTok 2 weeks ago. So follow me on TikTok. Username handle is Annie Yang Financial.
Awesome. Oh, I also have recently joined TikTok, so have to share experiences there. And I'll put all of those links in the episode description as well, so everyone can find them easily and won't have to remember or type anything too much. So lovely. Well, it's been great talking to you today. Really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you again for your time and for being here.
Thank you so much, David.
Well, as we wrap up this delightful episode, please remember that leadership and change go hand in hand, just like the holiday season and eating too much. If you have found Annie's insights as enlightening as I did, be sure to visit her financial advice YouTube and her website, get a copy of her book. Links to all of that is in the episode description. And of course, make sure to explore our other episodes. You can also visit www.leadernotaboss.com for more resources, links, and things to learn that will equip you to lead with flexibility and confidence, no matter how or how fast your industry changes. And there's even a link there on that website for you to schedule a complimentary chat with me about your specific leadership challenges and goals. Annie, thank you for being a shining star on our festive leadership tree today. To our listeners, your support makes this podcast a true gift, and your reviews are very much appreciated. Please do keep them coming. And we're nearly at the end of the season now. Only one more episode to go before I close things for the year at Leading with Integrity HQ, at least until 2024. So I hope you'll be able to join us again tomorrow on Christmas Eve for our Christmas special, when I'll be joined by 12, yes, a dozen different guests in a single episode. We're going to be talking about Christmas in a leadership context, because it can be quite a tough time of year for a lot of business leaders and managers for a variety of reasons, some of which we'll be discussing. But there's also going to be a bit of fun in a lot of the stories we'll hear as well. And that's all I'm going to tell you for now. I don't want to spoil it. Let's maintain the air of surprise and mystery. So yeah, I hope you'll be there tomorrow. And until then, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Keep having a Merry Christmas season. Only a few more sleeps to the big day. I'm sure everyone's counting. Happy listening, and be a leader, not a boss.